Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride because I'm a retired federal worker and proud of it. Uh, for me today, it's the 19th of October. There's 16 days or 17 days, I forgot exactly the number, left before the election, November 6th. So September has 30, so that's 11 and 6, 17 days to go. And however, by the time you see it, it's already going to be probably Tuesday of next week, which would be the 24th. And this same show, because I only tape once a month, is going to be the show after the election for 2 weeks. So I'm not going to pretend like I know how the election is going to come out, but I'm going to talk about two things. And the two things are, one, my prediction, and two, what would happen if Romney actually won. And I don't have a very nice scenario if Romney actually does win. Here is my prediction for what's going to happen. And my prediction is very, very simple. And I believe, as of the information that I have, as of the 19th of October, despite the vast increase in the polls of Mitt Romney, that Mitt Romney is still losing. Why do I say that? A couple things. One is the Midwest. Obama, I'm still going to see if I can move this. Obama is still ahead in the Midwest and has most of the East and the West Coast. And there's a few battleground states. I live in Arizona, as do most of you. And in Arizona, I see almost no national politicking. I'm in a very Republican neighborhood, and there's only one Romney-Ryan sign, and it's a little sign. And I know the guy whose house it is a Republican and Tea Party activist. So if he has one little sign, that's significant. All throughout the whole neighborhood, the only thing I see is Halloween decorations. I don't see any Obama stuff, but I don't see any Romney stuff either. And I would expect to. And I see a couple Flake signs. Flake is running for senator on the Republican side. So here in the Republican area, in a non-battleground state of Arizona, there's hardly any pro-Romney activity. I've been watching the streets and the freeways as I go around. I see only a couple Ryan Romney signs and a little more, but depending on the neighborhood I'm in, Obama signs. So I'm not seeing a lot of enthusiasm. I don't know if other people are, and I don't know whether if I went to Nevada, which is a battleground state, probably the nearest to us are Colorado, whether there'd be more activity. But here in Arizona, there's almost none. And I think that says something about either just how campaigns are done now, which is so narrowly targeted that the non-battleground states are ignored, or possibly that there really isn't a lot of Republican enthusiasm for Mitt Romney. Of course, in Arizona, there's probably not a lot of Democratic enthusiasm for Obama either. So I'm in a state that looks like there's not really an election going on. I see local signs and I see Senate signs, but I don't see hardly anything else. Maybe it's different up in Maricopa County. However, I would expect it. I would expect if there was just this groundswell of support that the Romney guys would be out in force in a red state right here in the middle of Arizona. And I don't see it. So I've been following the polls, and the polls just switched from registered voters or RV to likely voters. And by switching to likely voters, what they do is they do a calculation. They ask certain questions of the people who respond. And did you vote in the last election? Do you know where your polling place is? And things like that. And if they voted in the last election, they know where their polling place is, and they ask a couple more questions, then they're considered likely voters. Well, the only problem was the last election was almost overwhelmingly Republican. The Republicans were up 7 points overall, and they swept the House of Representatives and really drastically reduced Democratic control over the Senate. So it was a Republican sweep, and a lot of Republicans on an off-year election voted very seriously. There was a lot of get-out-the-vote effort, and hardly any on the Democratic side. So likely voters is, and when the pro-Romney people were complaining about the polls, which were registered voter polls, and saying it overrepresented Democrats, the likely voters seems to overrepresent Republicans. However, Gallup, which is the biggest polling outfit, and has been, had some squirrely results. In the 2000, which was so even in the national vote, the actual popular vote, within, 100,000 or something, or 500,000, actually for the loser. And that close showed Bush up 8 points, which is millions of voters. So they haven't been, in the likely voter, Gallup hasn't been very accurate. The other ones are very, very close. And almost all the registered voter polls shows Obama ahead 2 to 3 points. Part of the skew is that in the red states, the super red states in the South, almost everybody is voting for Romney, or at least most of the white males. So he has a tremendous increase in the popular vote. But in the places that count, which is the Midwest and Florida and Colorado, Nevada, these battleground states, especially Ohio, Obama's been polling 3 to 4, 2 to 4, 2 to 5 points up. Now, Real Clear Politics, which is another one of these predictive companies that does predictions, they show the Electoral College almost even, but when you click the no toss-ups button, Obama's ahead by 50 electoral votes and gets Ohio, Wisconsin, Nevada, and so on and so forth. The other problem is that Obama has his set of states that he won the last time, including Florida, Virginia, and North Carolina in the Deep South, which is unlikely today. However, Romney has to sweep almost every other state. If he wins Ohio, he can lose 1 or 2 of the battleground states. But if he loses Ohio and he's been consistently behind in Ohio, if it's within 5 points, they call it a toss-up. However, Obama has been consistently 3-4 points up in Ohio, week after week, day after day, and so on and so forth. And they're running ads with Romney literally coming out and saying, I said let Detroit go bankrupt, and people saying that would have bankrupted Ohio too. So if Romney doesn't win Ohio and loses just one of the other battleground states, he's not going to win, no matter what his popular vote is. The other problem is that because of the likely voter calculation, it doesn't take into account what happened in 2008. And in 2008, young people, minorities, Latin Americans, African Americans, so on and so forth, Native Americans, all came out and voted in droves. And that's not in the likely voter profile. So if that's repeated and there's early voting, Romney's in deep trouble. So here's my prediction. Romney's going to lose. He's going to lose in the Electoral College, and I think he's also going to lose maybe a half a point or 1 point in the popular vote as well. However, on that day, on November 6th, the right-wing media is going to go crazy. And the reason they're going to go crazy is because the Democrats are great at bringing out their people in early voting. So the exit polls on the day of the election are going to swing to the Republicans. So when the Republicans have these, gigantic pluses in the exit polls of the people who vote on election day in the swing states, everybody's going to say, "Oh, Romney has it," and then Romney's going to lose, and there's going to be all kinds of talk, and it's not going to be pretty. How can Romney win? The only way Romney can win is if he wins Ohio and almost all the other swing states. He has to win Nevada and Colorado, even though the polls, which show them pretty close, but Obama a little bit ahead, don't include the wild card of the year. And the wild card of the year is not Nader on the left, it's Johnson on the right. There's a libertarian out there, and that libertarian is going to pull off some of that Ron Paul vote, especially in the West and Nevada and Colorado. And I believe Romney's going to lose those two states, whether it polls to his favor or not, because Ron Paul voters are not going to tell pollsters that they support Obama. But the question is not given, do you have another choice? And they do. So what would happen if Romney actually won? Well, what would the scenario be? The first scenario is in Ohio, which tried to shut down early voting, but allow the military and their families to early vote, but not anybody else on the weekend before or the 3 or 4 days before. And he had a really bogus reason for it. It's because it's a hardship, for the for the early polls to be open, but they have to be open anyway for the military people. So the whole thing didn't make sense. And the real reason is there are big voter drives in Cleveland and in Youngstown and in Cincinnati and Columbus, to get the African-American vote out. They all come in on Sunday, and they go to church, and then they all bus out or drive cars over to the polls and vote. So that's part of what caused Obama to win in 2008. And the Republicans took over the state government, and there's a state election supervisor, Secretary of State, and this guy named Husted said, "I'm closing down all the polls. I'm not going to let these people do what they need to do in order to win." That went to court, and the court just shut it down. And then he said, "I'm instructing all of the leaders in Ohio to go ahead and close it anyway." And the court came back and said, "No, you're not." And he had to appear before the judge. And if he didn't turn around, he was about to get a contempt citation. Then he said, "All right, but I'm taking it to the Supreme Court of the United States," because it went up from the district to the appeals and then to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, Roberts got caught in the middle of Bush v. Gore, and the Supreme Court said, "We're not even taking it. Just go ahead and open the polls. Open the early voting." So the only way I see Romney really taking it is Husted comes together and he closes the polls anyway for early voting the week before the election. He just does it. Throw me in jail. So Romney wins, and then what happens? Well, there's a few months. Let's say also that the Democrats lose some seats And in the Senate, it's 50-50. And 50-50, basically what happens if there's 50-50, there was a case of it during Bush, all the committees are even Steven, and I'm not sure what they did for the majority leader, whether they were co-majority leaders. But if there's a tie, then the vice president shows up and breaks the tie. So the question is, if that occurs, first of all, what's going to happen during the lame duck? So if Romney wins, the lame duck happens, and there's a fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff basically is the Bush tax cuts go away, which actually improves the budget deficit by $400 to $500 billion a year. There was an agreement to increase the debt ceiling, and that agreement said that they would reduce the overall deficit by a certain $1.2 trillion in 10 years. And if they can't, then there's going to be a sequester of $50 billion worth of defense spending and $50 billion worth of domestic spending. So that's another $100 billion. Then there's certain Medicare payments which are against the current law, but which have been waived year by year by year, so the doctors and hospitals can get higher payments. That would go away, and that would decrease the deficit by another $100 billion. So basically, you would have the deficit go from $1.1 trillion, or 1,100 billion, down to only $400 billion, which would cut the deficit by 2/3. Anybody who's for cutting the deficit, but it might spark another recession. So if Romney wins, I think the Democrats, with their last little bit of power in the Senate, will block any consideration of canceling the fiscal cliff, and the country will go over the fiscal cliff just as Romney becomes president. So Romney becomes president. Republicans still have the House, but not by such a big margin, and they now control the Senate, at least in the sense that they have a vice president who sits and breaks the ties, and there will be a tie every time. So the Republicans go in there, and the first thing they want to do is repeal Obamacare, which has passed the House a number of times. So repeal Obamacare passes the House. It goes to the Senate, and it should be blocked in the Senate because of a filibuster. However, in order to get it passed in the first place, it passed as a tax bill. And a tax bill can't be filibustered. So first thing off, on the first day of Romney's term, he sits down and there is a bill canceling Obamacare. So Romney signs it. And what does that do? Well, opens the donut hole. The donut hole is some little quirk in the rules that was overcome by Obamacare, where so many millions, and I forgot the number, 10 or something like that, seniors don't get lower drug benefits or lower drug prices, and all the drug prices and the Medicare subsidies for those particular seniors, they go away. So all of a sudden, 10 million seniors have to pay more for their Medicare and their Medicare drug allotment. What else happens? All of a sudden, the precondition part of Obamacare goes away, so that any insurance company can deny anybody if they're already sick and then just not insure them at all. There's no protection. And then, on top of that, all the people that are 18 to 26 that have been carried on their parents' insurance, they lose that insurance. So now you have a situation where 15 or 20 million people are instantly affected negatively by an act that Romney has just done. So Romney's, every president has a honeymoon. So support goes up to 60, 70%. But Romney's honeymoon is going to be very, very short. And the reason it's going to be short is because he just messed with 20 million people. Plus, the Democrats are pushing rumors that the Republicans are trying to sneak through the Ryan plan. What's the Ryan plan? Voucherize Medicare and take 1/3 of the payroll tax, which goes and covers Social Security, and puts them in basically a 401k plan controlled by Wall Street mavens right there. But that 1/3 is now supporting our current Social Security receivers. So Social Security becomes bankrupt instantly, which is exactly what the right wants. They want it to be bankrupt, and if it is bankrupt, then they can get rid of it. So, and again, this hasn't passed yet, but they can try to pass it as a tax law, and if they do, then it can't be filibustered. However, I don't think they can, but they'll certainly try. So we have this situation where all of a sudden Romney, within months of his taking office, his support and his approval rating has gone from 60% to 25%. Basically, the only people still supporting Romney are the hardcore Tea Party, and some of those are being, because he's taking criticism from Limbaugh and all those other guys too, and everybody else. Meanwhile, he's promised 12 million jobs, which come right out of his head, and a magnificent economy. We've gone over the fiscal cliff, and without the Democrats, they can't get off the fiscal cliff because the Democrats are going to, the budget has to be approved. It has to go through the, first the budget and then the other committees, Ways and Means and so on and so forth, appropriations committees, and the Democrats have half the voters on those on each of those committees because it's 50-50. So the Democrats are going to do everything they can to bottle it up, and meanwhile, that 100,000 or 150,000 jobs a month that were coming through at the end of Obama, those are gone. And we're on the edge of going into a recession. Now, Romney can blame the Democrats, and the Democrats in Congress are going to be very unpopular. However, it's 2 years before the next election, and Romney has made some really extreme promises. And things are getting worse. They're not getting better. And the Democrats are giving him the same treatment that the Republicans gave Obama, which is no cooperation whatsoever. So the other thing that Romney's going to do, and he says he's going to do on the first day, he's going to basically get rid of all the people that enforce the commodities, which is also the derivative rules in this Commodities Future Trading Commission, or CFTC. He's going to get rid of all those guys in the Securities and Exchange Commission who weren't that effective in the first place, but are going to be even less effective when they're out of a job. So he's going to defund all of those things. He can do that with executive order. And before you know it, there's going to be weird situations where Google stock goes down 70% in overnight. Why? Because there's naked shorts. Naked shorts are technically illegal, but there's nobody enforcing it. And commodities prices are going to go up for no reason. The food prices are going to skyrocket in 1 month and then come back down the next. Gas prices and everything else. The Wall Street people want to make money. They want to make money they haven't been allowed to make under Obama, and they will. And they don't care whether it hurts Romney or not. So all this stuff is all going to come together, all during Romney's first 6 months. And the result is Romney is going to be extremely unpopular, extremely early. in his presidency. Thank you very much. My name is Reed Silverne. I still think Obama's going to win, so we won't have that scenario. Thank you for watching.